7 out of 10 pills that we find during traffic stops, there's going to be fentanyl, some amount of fentanyl in those.
Fentanyl is touching the criminal community in a way that no other drug has ever touched in my years of experience, and we've got to put an end to it.
It's the leading cause of accidental overdoses in the United States.
To even suspect your kids of doing drugs, intervene.
Thank you for staying with us in our continuing coverage, Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis. I'm Bob Bartley.
And I'm Joni McKinnon, and we have several special guests joining us tonight as we move into providing more information during this exclusive program about Big Country Homepage and the fentanyl crisis. So our guest tonight, we'd like to introduce you, Taylor County Sheriff Ricky Bishop joining us. Thank you. The Program Director at Abilene Recovery Council, Cindy Frazier. Dr. Gary Holland, Taylor County Health Authority, Kelly Bankin, the Administrator of Citizens MS, Callahan County, and of course, Nolan County District Attorney Ricky Thompson. So thank you. Welcome tonight.
And we thank you all for being here for this serious conversation, honestly. For those who may need a little background on what fentanyl is and why it's causing such a crisis, let's get some of the basics out of the way first. Turn to you, Dr. Holland. As a medical professional, explain what fentanyl is and why do people use it?
It's a synthetic opioid, so opioids are painkillers, analgesics. It's very potent. It's used, it has some legitimate uses. It's manufactured duragesic patches that sometimes people wear. We use it in hospice because sometimes people can't swallow medications or they're on something that doesn't work. So it's legitimate usage, but it's being used, it's being manufactured by labs that are not controlled, not pharmaceutical companies, Mexico, China, and put into pills. It's been laced into legitimate pills like hydrocodone, oxycodone, also illegitimate meds like heroin and morphine. And the reason is that it's very cheap and it allows the drug dealers to reduce the cost of their pills but still get the people high. And it's very, very effective. It's like 50 times as potent as heroin and 100 times per milligram as morphine. So for the people that are manufacturing it illicitly, it's a wonderful thing that helps their bottom line.
Cindy, so what do you see in here at the Recovery Council? I mean, you're dealing with these people and you're trying to prohibit it from going further.
True. Our assessment and referral for treatment program, anybody that comes in with any type of opioid use disorder, they really kind of just go to the front of the line as far as assessment and getting them into treatment. We know that they really are going to need the quickest response, and so we're trying to work with them. And then we always try and just meet people where they are in their recovery walk, and so our recovery coaches will walk the path that they want because everybody's recovery may look different. And so they just try and make it work for them and for their life. And then we do a lot of prevention education in the community.
Kelly, turning to you next from the EMS position from Callahan County. Someone in the county calls 911 for help. How do your crews know what they're responding to, and do they not know until they get to the scene, and what do they do after that?
We're normally dispatched, and it gives us an idea if they have an overdose or if they're unresponsive. But until we actually get on scene to assess that patient, we really don't know. And the signs and symptoms that we look for with a fentanyl overdose or an opioid overdose would be if the patient is unconscious, if they have agonal respirations or shallow breathing, if they're snoring respirations as well, and pinpoint pupils, as well as cyanosis to the lips.
So your people have to go through training to figure all this out, to be able to spot that when they get there.
That is correct.
Yeah. Where do your people go? Where do you get staff from?
We get staff from all over the big country. So from those who have EMT certifications And we have our EMTs, we have our advanced EMTs, as well as our paramedics.
And just because you're dispatched to a situation and they presume it's one substance, like Dr. Holland said, if it's something that's been laced, you have to take those steps to see past what you've been told and pick up on the clues for anything else.
That is correct, and that comes with our full assessment of that patient.
A lot of parents around the table, and we were all fearful. I have a teenager myself, and I mean, the thought of our kids coming across this drug in any way, shape, or form is just terrifying. I know it is to me and to other parents out there. So, I mean, how do you know if it's laced with fentanyl? I mean, what can it look like? Are there different forms? Cindy, do you know?
That's the problem with some of this is fentanyl doesn't, it takes such a small amount to be a potentially lethal dose. Equivalent to 4 to 6 grains of table salt would fit on the tip of a pencil. And so you can't see it that it's in there. You can't taste it. You're not going to know it until you've ingested it, until you possibly go into an overdose. And because every of those counterfeit drugs are all different, one might have very small amounts of fentanyl, one might have enough to put you in an overdose that's survivable, and some of them may have an amount that is not survivable.
That gets back to Dr. Helen saying, you know, they're cutting this with other drugs, and it's not a controlled, it's not a lab, there's no regulations to it.
Exactly. It's safe to never take anything that you didn't get from a pharmacy or you didn't get from a prescription.
I mean, anything at all.
Anything at all.
Because because a friend gives it to you, they may not know what's actually in that gummy or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, because your friend bought it from somebody who's not going to represent this as if they're even selling you heroin or another pill, they're not going to tell you what's in it.
Even things like Adderall, which is still a controlled substance, but.
And I think that if the friend has a pill he's taking and he gives you the same pill, it may not have the same amount.
Exactly.
So, you know, you're just looking at trouble no matter what you do with it.
So don't take anything from anybody, I guess, huh?
Yes.
That's the safest approach, and like we said earlier, unless it's doctor prescribed and you know what's in it, drug dealers aren't going to be forthcoming with what's in their drug. I think they're not going to tell you verbatim what's in there. It doesn't come with a label, and so they're selling you a product that they're trying to make money off of any way they can, and so they're not going to be upfront with that. And so the best way, like they're saying, to not do that is not to buy it and not take it from people and things like that. That's the safest approach.
Sheriff Bishop, your deputies out on the streets making traffic stops and responding to other emergency calls, what have they seen so far in this just here in Taylor County?
So I'll expand it over to our narcotics division, where roughly 7 out of every 10 vehicles they pull over has some form of meth or fentanyl in that vehicle.
7 out of 10?
Yes.
Wow.
That's the stats they're coming up with so far. And just within the last 2 weeks, they made a traffic stop, got 1,000 fentanyl pills off of a man, and then was able to get a search warrant for his home and found another 4,000 fentanyl pills. And he was going to be a dealer for here in Abilene. And we were able to file on him through the federal system.
That's not someone moving through Taylor County. That's someone who is here.
He's living here and he's selling these drugs to anybody and everybody that'll buy them.
How much money how much did it cost to get the 5,000 pills, and how much money can he make off of that?
On average, they're buying pills for $5 a piece and then selling them for $25, $30 a piece. And Abilene has become the hub for this area for selling just about any drug you can find, because it all passes through here, goes to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, gets cut, gets split up, however they do it, and then people from here drive there, or the guys from Dallas-Fort Worth area are driving here to sell it, and then they drive right back. And then everything gets dispersed from Abilene to the surrounding big country from there.
And there's no way to really track who those people are, is there?
Just through lots of investigations.
Yeah.
And, you know, like that one is going to yield more arrests just off of that one guy. And, you know, I've got 6, 7 guys that work closely with the federal system, the Abilene Police Department, and other agencies, and, you know, they're knocking it out of the park doing what they can. But until something happens at the border and shut that down as much as possible, it's going to keep growing. It's not going to slow down.
Because they're moving up straight from the border to Abilene as well.
Correct.
So that, yeah, it's all coming across the border.
All coming across the border.
Made in,
Made in Mexico. Some of your fentanyls, or a lot of it's coming out of China, getting produced in labs there, goes to Mexico, gets pressed into the pills and different things there, added into whatever, and then it gets brought up here. And then we've even had a few that are here in Abilene pressing and making those pills themselves, and just in homes here, manufacturing them themselves.
do you see that in your courtroom in Nolan County? How many cases, do you deal a lot with this?
We deal with a lot of illegal substances. I mean, I would say 90 to 95% of our caseload can be tied to some form of drug use in itself. And Sheriff Bishop's right, it is being saturated. The market is being saturated with methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, just because it's coming across the border and it's just being released on the streets. And so the amounts are going up, the cost is going down. Like anything, you have a lot of a product, the cost is going to go down. And so we're seeing a lot of it. And so, yeah, I would say our caseload, I mean, over the past 8 to 9 years have increased at least by 40%.
Well, we see those busts that are made in Nolan County. We see them in conjunction with Taylor County working together for that. So once you have them at this bust and you have these individuals and they're in jail, I mean, do they go to therapy? Do they go to prison? What happens with this next? I mean, and how do we? Is that just the tip of the iceberg?
I think the approach we have taken is, you know, the demand you have to hit and the supply, and I think you have to treat it differently. I think the supply or the drug dealers, I think in my approach is the people who are feeding off people's addiction, they need to go to prison. I think that's my approach. I think people that are actually struggling with drug addiction, as far as the demand side of it, we do take an approach to try to get rehabilitation, because if we're able to rehabilitate that individual or get them help, I think that can save us a lot of issues in the long run, you know. And so we do seek rehabs. We have a drug court program at Nolan County that post-adjudication, meaning that they pled guilty and they go into this program and try to get counseling and things like that. And so, and one of the requirements to get into that is that you can't deal drugs. And so, and if they're known drug dealers, they don't qualify for that. And so it does take a two-step approach for that. I do know we've utilized a lot of if we're able to tie it to multiple individuals who are sharing money, engaging in organized criminal activity is a big law we use in my area, because it bumps the degree up on drug dealers, and it carries parole issues as far as half time served instead of quarter time served. And so those are creative ways we try to keep them in longer, in that way they're not out dealing in the streets. But I think it is a two-step approach, dealing with the supply and the demand differently.
Have you seen an increase in Taylor County?
Oh yeah, over the last couple of years, it's definitely increased. And even heroin's made a pretty good comeback in this area. And some of it is because those that want to get off fentanyl, the after effects are so strong that they go on to heroin, because the withdrawals are so much less on heroin than they are if they just quit fentanyl cold turkey. So they'll get on the heroin and then just quit heroin cold turkey after that, if they don't jump on the meth and stay on that. So, but meth and fentanyl is our two biggest drugs in this area right now.
So they're all really interconnected.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So Kelly, when you guys do go out on these calls, I mean, if you think it's a fentanyl overdose, I mean, and you take the necessary precautions, what are you looking for? I mean, and how can you bring someone back if you think they've overdosed, and what are the next steps once you arrive on the scene?
If we do suspect a fentanyl overdose or an opioid type overdose, we do use Narcan on scene, and we do transport the patient, because they can always relapse back into that overdose from the use of either whatever opiate they used or fentanyl.
So this Narcan that we're seeing out here that's available, it's being made available, thankfully, that's not the end of the line.
No, it is not.
And just because you administer a dose and the person comes back, they're revived, that doesn't mean that they're out of the woods.
It does not. No, they have to call 911 so we can actually monitor that patient, bring
And
them
they
to
need
the
further
facility.
medical treatment, it sounds like.
Yes.
Dr. Holland, what are the signs of an overdose? How does if it's a family member or a friend, know that there is an apparent overdose situation?
Well, it depends on the drug. Like Kelly was saying, there's opioids, and then fentanyl is kind of a super drug. So just basically opioids make you sleepy, you kind of get high, you might get drowsy. But the fentanyl, because it's so potent and depresses the respiratory drive, makes you breathe slower. You start to gurgle when you breathe. You're not getting the air in and out. You may have pallor or cyanosis of your fingers or toes. Just lose consciousness completely. Some people just pass out and quit breathing. So it's a severe decrease in neurological function. And so anybody that's really out of it, loss of consciousness, limp, going limp, passing out, have to wonder if it's something really strong like fentanyl, as opposed to just too many hydrocodone or codeine or something. Mm-hmm. So, and that could be due to other things besides drugs. So anybody that's having a decreased level of consciousness needs immediate treatment. If you think it could be fentanyl, then the Narcan is a great thing. They'll wake up for a while. They may even be mad at you for I've heard stories of people on a really good high, and they feel awful, because if you're coming off of an opioid, you feel pretty bad for a while. But then they can go back into the sedation also. They need immediate medical treatment. But the idea is to recognize it might be an overdose, use the Narcan, and look for all the mainly signs of decreased level of consciousness is what we look for.
Well, as a doctor, what do you do when they show up in the emergency room?
Well, it depends on how bad off they are. If their respirations are poor, they'll first put them on oxygen. If it's really poor, they'll put a tube down their throat and use the ventilator. If they haven't had Narcan, they'll certainly get Narcan. Try to support their blood pressure.
How do you know if they've had Narcan?
Well, you don't know.
Oh, okay.
If you think they might have had. If it looks like it, that's a good point.
Okay.
Give them the Narcan. You mean if they've had Narcan?
Yes.
Well, I think.
Would you give them another dose? Does that make it?
If you're not sure, it's safe. You can't really overdose on it. If there's no history of having had it, you would probably give another dose. But just depending on their level of consciousness and their vital signs, however much help they need, until you're pretty sure that it's all worn off. So you have to be really diligent and look closely.
And fentanyl is used in the hospital. I mean, it is a good drug.
It's a good drug. It can be used IV. I think there's even legitimate pills, but I haven't seen that being used. The main thing I'm seeing is the duragesic patch, which is a very good patch. The beauty of fentanyl is there's just enough in the patch. It takes 12 to 24 hours to get into your system, but it's smooth and it stays in your system, as opposed to taking hydrocodone or something. You kind of go up and down with your pain relief. So we love it with hospice patients and some patients maybe in chronic pain, because it works, it stays in, they don't have to take pills, and it's kind of smooth. But the legitimate use is not the problem, it's the illegitimate use. And
so a person in the hospital kind of out of it, hearing the word fentanyl, should not, if you're in a hospital in a controlled situation, that's okay.
Yeah, and there have been people actually take fentanyl patches and cut them and chew them up, and it goes right through your oral mucosa. So, I mean, it's still a dangerous drug, even in a legitimate patch, but it has legitimate uses. We'd hate to not have it available.
Yeah.
The lengths that people will go to get this drug, and at the same time,
you're desperate when you're an addict.
Of course, you said they come out of it mad, angry that you've saved their life.
Yeah,
essentially.
I mean, I would take the doctor's use. I wouldn't. You definitely don't want to go outside what your doctor's telling you to use the fentanyl. I mean, it can be dangerous.
Yeah,
even
people
in that
put on
way.
more than one patch.
Yeah.
However many they can get.
So Cindy, for someone who's experiencing, or whether it's them or someone they're close to, and they're going through an addiction to it, and maybe they're reacting to the drug, what would you?
As far as going through a substance use disorder, one of the biggest things we try and educate on is reducing that stigma of, we don't use words like addict or junkie. They have a substance use disorder, they have an opioid use disorder, they have an alcohol use disorder, because if we reduce that stigma of them feeling like that's who they are, they're more likely, we have found, to seek treatment. If this is just one part of who they are versus they're not just an addict.
There's more to them.
They're a person. We try and talk to people if they see somebody in a hospital or an emergency situation. Look beyond the overdose, because there could be some other traumas or other things happening in their life that has brought them here, or they've been given something they weren't aware of. And so you have to look beyond that overdose. And if they are using something that they're buying and using, we want to reduce that stigma so we can get them into some treatment and get them into recovery. So they will be a great part of our community. We want people to survive and be, prosperous and be an asset to our community.
Advocate for better wellness.
I think
Yes.
I'd like to point out, counseling and all is very important, before drug use and after. There also are medications, and there's some local, the West Texas Counseling and Rehab Center uses methadone, which is a sort of a lower level opioid to reduce cravings and help people get off the opioid. It has to be under a controlled setting with physicians. And then buprenorphine is another partial opioid agonist that's used to help people that are on the really strong stuff, bring it down, help them get off of it slowly in a controlled setting. So there's medications that can help.
Yes.
It's not like you necessarily have to go cold turkey, but between medications, counseling, and all that together, it's a
Can be very
useful.
effective.
So there is a way out of it.
Yeah, it's difficult. Nobody's going to tell you it's not difficult.
Yeah.
But somebody who wants to change can get help.
Sheriff, I think Joni alluded to it earlier. Why are people selling drugs to people who are dying, which seems like it would be killing off their clientele?
This is so addictive, they'll just go out and get new clientele without any problems. The only thing they care about is making money for themselves and making money for the cartels back in Mexico, so they can expand, their riches and their organizations, so they can be the leaders. It's unfortunately, they don't care what they do. They just want the dollar.
The rational mind seems like it's very counterproductive. If we're going to sell this drug that's potentially lethal, one, why would you take it if you thought you could die from it? And two, why would you sell something that you potentially are going to lose a client or customer because of that?
Yes.
And so you're referring to the Mexican cartels. So they are here?
They are here in Abilene, yes. Yes, we have linked some people back to, like the number 2 guy, back to the cartel in Mexico.
It's not a Hollywood made-up story.
No, it's not. They are here, and they are doing everything they can to make as much money as they can any way they can.
As law enforcement in your case and in the courtroom, how do we stop it?
You've got to get a handle on the border, which will slow some things down to where we can try to get a handle on our end, and also being able to modify laws where they can prosecute people for murder because they've been poisoned and don't know it.
When did that just started, right?
It's September 1st of 2023, so it's
Okay.
nearly been a year
Yeah.
that's came in. That was that last legislative session that came into work, and we've actually utilized it at least in 4 different cases since then. But it's a pretty broad statute. Just giving someone drugs and they overdose and die from that. That is a broad statute. When you look at it's just an extra paragraph in the murder statute under that section. And the other sections deal with intent and knowingly, and this is just, hey, you give somebody that, and it's laced with different narcotics, and they die from that issue, then you can charge them with that.
Has that been publicized enough, or do they care?
I don't think they really care, because some of them don't think they're going to get caught.
Yeah.
Especially those that are driving in from Dallas-Fort Worth to sell their drugs here, and they go right back. They don't think it'll get back to them. But
Cindy, you talked about the new statute and it being now considered a murder charge. because it's essentially poisoning. Maybe,
Right.
and I thought, but that's not the languaging we've been hearing along with this. Although we're glad the charge is there, but I think when people understand that you're poisoning another person, it raises the level of seriousness in a lot of our minds.
Right, and we've changed that terminology when we do presentations. We don't call them an overdose death necessarily. It's a poisoning death because the people taking it did not know they were taking fentanyl. And so that changes, it kind of changes the way somebody will look at it if I overdose versus I was poisoned.
Yeah.
Your family member was poisoned. And that takes a whole different perspective on their death.
Especially if it's of a controlled substance that perhaps that they thought they knew the dosaging or how much. I mean, because the fentanyl, when it's laced into it, there's no control over that. And so it,
And that's the big issue, because they're taking an amount of something that's given to them that they're
presuming
built up over time, a tolerance that they can use even more than what they've started with, right? Because they've used over time. Well, they're not anticipating that extra lacing of another drug in there. And so their body's not used to that drug as they are the other drugs. And so that's why the adverse effects happen, is it's just they're taking an amount that they think is just one drug that they've tolerated and they're able to use, and they know they're able to use, but it's laced with other drugs, and fentanyl being one of them. And a lot of fentanyl, because just a little bit of it, but they're adding so much to it, it's just shooting the levels really high.
And there's a difference between people, some people who've been on some sort of opioid, legitimate or otherwise, will tolerate fentanyl better than somebody who's opioid naive, which means that people who are opioid naive need to be especially careful about getting a hold of something, because they're much more liable to be overdosed and really sick from it than somebody whose receptors are already.
I mean, Kelly, you said you obviously you have Narcan on hand, but Sheriff Bishop, I mean, your officers have it on hand too. I mean,
Yes.
Carrying and having Narcan accessible seems to be, I mean, just the way of the future.
It's unfortunately, yes.
Well, now, so your deputies are trained to use Narcan
Yes.
if they think that it's appropriate in that situation.
Correct.
But they're calling 911 or radioing
Oh yeah,
back for an
yeah.
ambulance.
We've always got an ambulance coming, and we had a call not too long ago in Ty where a guy was unresponsive, and they weren't sure what happened to him. I believe he was an employee at one of the truck stops, and they get there and they immediately, I think they ended up giving him 3 or 4 different doses of Narcan before he came to, and he actually started fighting when he came to. Because he didn't know he didn't know he'd been on the floor. He didn't know they'd already been doing CPR on him. And then we found out that he had actually taken some heroin that somebody had given him about 2 hours before.
So you have Narcan. We've got the vending machine now in the Recovery Council. Where else can we get Narcan? Is it accessible? Is it just, I mean, do we only not call 911? How do people get their hands on it?
It's very accessible. You can buy it over the counter. One thing I wish that Texas would do and other states do is they offer some states offer Narcan with every opioid prescription. I wish that Texas, that's my pie in the sky dream, is that Texas would do that someday. I'd love to see the legislation come on that. But the Abilene Health Department provides Narcan for free. Our agency provides it. It's available in several different ways. In the vending machine, I know that just this morning we had to refill the vending machine again. So we've refilled it twice. We've refilled it 3 times since 4th of July weekend.
And which is how many?
Approximately about 40 doses. Every box has 2 doses. So if you're getting a box out of the vending machine, you have 2 doses. They're 4 milligrams apiece. And so you can give a total of 8 milligrams of Narcan if needed for the person.
It might be something that somebody that's on chronic pain medication, an older person,
Yes.
Something especially strong like hydrocodone, which we've used in the past, and it's still good for pain, would want to have on hand just in case somebody got confused or decided to take more than they should. Have Narcan on hand just because it's a possibility if that kind of medicine's
Didn't
in the
know that they'd
house.
already taken their dosage.
Right. They just forget.
Is Narcan new? Is that?
Relatively new. I'm not sure how long it's been
Yeah.
around. It's naloxone is the chemical name. But
it's something we're seeing on hand, like you said, with our officers or with EMTs. Even schools are starting to keep it on campuses.
Yes, their schools are keeping it on campus. Just whether it be a student that needs it, somebody coming into the school, somebody attending a football game. Some of them are keeping on their buses. when they're transporting students, because you just never know where you're going to come across somebody, and if you're able to save their life, then it's worth to have it right there and handy.
Makes sense.
Well, this has been an interesting, wonderful,
Enlightening.
informative conversation. Before we wrap things up, do want each of you to put in a final thought. We'll start with Sheriff Ricky Bishop, also Chief of the View Volunteer Fire Department.
I think the biggest message that needs to get out there to everybody is do not take something that you don't get prescribed or you buy over the counter from the store. If you don't know where that pill comes from, you don't take it. You don't know what's in it, where it came from, and that person that's giving it to you may not know either. So stay away from it and take only your own medications.
Okay. Thanks, Sheriff. And Cindy Frazier, Abilene Recovery Council Program Director, your final thought.
I think that the biggest thing that we try and get across is that I feel really personal about is that if you're able to revive somebody from an overdose from Narcan, you're giving them the opportunity to get into treatment, into recovery. And it's never wrong to use Narcan. It will never hurt anyone. No one will ever go in an overdose, and get educated. And we're here to provide any services, and all of our services are free.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm glad to know that it can be used on anyone safely at any time.
Dr. Gary Holland from the Taylor County Health Authority.
Yeah, I think in my mind, education is so important. You know, before the fact, after the fact, before people overdose, to know that pills are dangerous, any kind of pill, especially something that you don't know what it is. Just kids especially that don't know any better maybe needs to be educated as much as things like what you're doing here. And then after the fact, someone who's addicted to opioids, opioid use disorder, or has a history of addiction or has overdosed before, knowing that there's a lot of help available, there's counseling, there's cognitive therapy, and there's also medications that can help, which are a little bit more difficult to get. But there's things to be told to the public before and after the fact, and the more we can get out the message, the better off people will be, and the more chance we have to maybe save somebody's life. So.
Very good. And Kelly Badigan from the Citizens EMS in Callahan County, final thought from you.
My final thought is definitely call 911 if you do suspect a fentanyl overdose. Even if you did administer a Narcan, we're still there to help, and continue to stay safe out there, really.
And Ricky Thompson.
Don't call me Richard.
District Attorney in Nolan County.
I think of this, and it's come from a couple of trials I've done like this, is a lot of individuals who might be with an individual who might be experiencing a fentanyl overdose and is in crisis. They're scared to call because maybe they have drugs. They might have illegal narcotics on them. They might be worried that they're going to get in trouble. In my area, and I maintain this, I even used it told in a closing argument, that it would go a long way for me, and I think in law enforcement in general, if you save a life, if you sit there no matter what selfish reasons and you put those aside and you look at that person, because it is a human being, and you say, I'm going to call and I'm going to save their life no matter what's in here, I think law enforcement and prosecutors would look at that and be like, you know what? That goes a long way. That is not going to carry a punishment like it would with just letting them die. And so that's my final thought. If people are out there and they think, I can't call because I have these narcotics on me, I've been breaking the law, to me, that would go a long way, and that might even be charges not filed, that you saved a life. And let's get you treatment, let's get you help, let's get them help, and we can save 2 lives in that process. You just letting them die, not calling, that's 2 lives gone. And to me, that means a lot if you could just step up and say, hey, I'm going to save a life today.
Okay, bottom line, somebody is watching this right now, who do they call? Who do they call for help?
What's the first call?
Cindy?
I mean, in an overdose situation, 911's your first call.
Okay, yeah. All right.
I mean, and if you need treatment or medicated treatment or a treatment facility, we are here. There's several other agencies in town. If you have a mental health issue, Betty Hardwick is our local mental health authority. But education is the key. We have Tucker's Law now that's requiring education for our 6th through 12th graders on opioids. It's all that education.
Is that soon enough? Is 6 through 12?
That's the most maturity level.
Okay. Okay.
And we do prescription drug safety with younger kids, but opioid education starts at 6th grade.
Okay.
And you can go to churches. Any churches are going to have avenues that you can get help to.
Yes.
Churches, nonprofit. I mean, they're all over. There's a bunch of nonprofits that will guide you to the resources that you need. And these counties, I work in the counties in Taylor County. All these counties have people that care. If you just reach out and ask for it, and I think any minister, any nonprofit, any of these people will guide you in the process to get help. Yeah. And the first road is just saying, I need help. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And I think you're right. I think a lot of people are concerned that they have some drugs in the house and they don't want the law enforcement involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very enlightening. Thank you to all of you, Mr. Thompson. Thanks to all of our guests for continuing this education and the conversation that we're having, that a necessary conversation that we can't stop having. We need to continue this as well, that we must have on confronting the fentanyl crisis.
It appears to be a problem that we'll have for a while, but KTAB and Big Country Homepage will continue to cover it as we have been doing tonight. Do want to thank our production crew, the KTAB News Department and Engineering for helping put all of this together, and for McMurray University for allowing us to use their beautiful new Garrison Student Center for this recording tonight. We thank you very much.